I have worked in Aldenmuir's archive rooms for 11 years, and in that time I have catalogued 4,212 objects, regimental banners, campaign maps, sealed dispatch pouches, citation ledgers, and 2 crates of boot buckles that no one could explain. I am not a woman given to drama. I record what I see, I note what I cannot verify, and I move on. What happened in the crypt gallery corridor on the 14th of November is in my field notebook. I have written it out twice, in 2 separate hands, because the first time, I was not sure I believed my own record. Director Halvard Sen arrived at Aldenmuir on a Tuesday morning with 11 members of his cultural delegation and a palace liaison officer who looked as though he had not slept in 3 days. Sen was a foreign antiquities official of some standing, a tall man, gray at the temples, with the particular walk of someone who has never once been told that a room was not available to him. His delegation carried equipment cases, camera equipment, and the kind of quiet entitlement that passes, in diplomatic circles, for expertise. I was already in the corridor when they arrived. The crypt gallery runs beneath the oldest wing of the palace, a vaulted stone passage, perhaps 40 meters long, lit by iron bracket lamps that have not changed in design since the household was founded. The regimental banners of the 1st and 2nd Aldenmuir are sealed behind arched glass panels on either side. 31 banners in all, their colors still readable under the glass, though the fabric itself is 3 centuries old. At the far end of the corridor stands the iron threshold door, riveted, without a lock in the conventional sense. Its only mechanism a recessed handle that requires a specific pressure from the inside. Beyond it is the interment chamber, the founding colors of the household, sealed in the dark since the regiment was stood down. No one goes through that door. In 11 years of working in this wing, I have never seen it open. I was at my station near the 3rd banner panel, making a condition note on a stress fracture in the glass mount, when I heard the delegation come down the stone staircase. Sen was already speaking as he descended, something about sightlines and documentation angles, what the survey team would need, what the archival photography required, and he swept into the corridor with the brisk confidence of a man who has already mentally completed the task he is arriving to begin. His delegation filed in after him, 2 photographers with equipment cases, 3 scholars with leather folios, 2 translators, a government registrar, and 3 staff members whose purpose I never determined. The liaison officer followed last, slightly breathless, already scanning the corridor with the expression of a man who knows something is about to become his fault. The corridor changed when they entered it. That sounds imprecise, but I mean it practically. 11 people in a 40-meter stone passage alter the acoustics, fill the lamplight differently, bring the smell of outdoor air and coffee and fresh laundered cloth into a space that usually smells only of cool stone and old linen. Sen moved through it the way men of that type move through any space they have been given access to, as inventory. His eyes went to the banner panels, to the archive reference marks on the glass mounts, to the vaulted ceiling. He was cataloging the room before he had finished entering it. He stopped when he reached Corporal Idris Wren. Wren was stationed at the threshold, as he always is. He stands at the center of the corridor's final 4 meters, directly before the iron door, in the red tunic and black bearskin of the household guard. He is not a tall man, but he occupies space in a way that taller men rarely achieve, a quality of absolute stillness that makes the air around him seem thicker, as though he has been there so long that the stone itself has arranged itself around him. I have passed him hundreds of times. I do not think I have ever seen him blink. Sen looked at Wren the way a man looks at a pillar. "This is the threshold access," he said to the liaison officer, not to Wren. "We'll need 5 minutes inside with full lighting." The liaison officer cleared his throat. "The threshold is..." Corporal Wren manages access to the interment passage. Sen turned and regarded Wren for the first time. He produced, from an inner pocket, a folded document, his diplomatic clearance, endorsed by the palace's External Affairs Secretariat. He held it out toward the guard, at shoulder height, the way you might offer a ticket at a gate. Wren did not take it. He did not look at it. He stood with his eyes forward, and his rifle at the carry, and said nothing at all. Sen lowered the document slowly. He turned back to the liaison officer. "Living scenery," he said, quietly, almost conversationally, but in the particular half-turned way of a man who intends to be overheard. Two of his delegation members smiled. Someone should have warned me. What's the procedure for getting past the furniture? I stopped writing. I noted the time, 10:43 in the morning. The liaison officer was explaining something about the threshold being under independent household authority, something about a separate authorization pathway, and Sen was listening with the patient, fractionally bored expression of a man who has already decided that explanations are a formality. He nodded along, then simply said, "I have the Secretariat clearance. That supersedes internal protocols. We'll proceed." He began to walk forward. Ren did not move. Sen stopped. He was perhaps 2 arms lengths from the guard now. Up close, the height difference was more apparent. Sen had several inches on the corporal, and he drew himself up slightly, a posture I recognized from my years cataloging aristocratic portraiture, the unconscious squaring of the shoulders that men with institutional power perform when they expect a subordinate to yield. Ren did not yield. The corridor was quiet. The banner panels caught the bracket lamp light in long amber strips along the stone floor. Behind Sen, his delegation had stilled into a loose semicircle, and the liaison officer was standing very carefully to one side, in the practiced position of a man who has decided this is no longer his problem. "I'm going to ask you," Sen said, with the careful courtesy of a man being generous, "to step aside." "Nothing. I have an endorsed authorization from your own palace secretariat. Whatever internal custom applies here, it is superseded. I have a documentation window of 40 minutes, and I intend to use it." He waited. Ren gave him nothing, not a flicker, not a shift of weight, not the smallest acknowledgement that Sen had spoken. "I have spent 11 years around men and women who work in this palace, and I can tell you that the stillness of a guard on duty is not the same as the stillness of a man who has nothing to say. There is a quality to it, a density, that communicates something without communicating anything at all. It is the professional counterpart of a locked door, not a refusal, not an argument, simply a fact about the world that you have encountered and must now account for. Sen, I think, had never encountered it before. He turned to the delegation. "Get me the senior household officer." Then, more quietly, to the man nearest him. "This is absurd. It's a ceremonial posting. The Secretariat doesn't endorse clearances for curtains." His registrar moved off toward the staircase. 2 of the scholars had drifted to the nearest banner panel, the 9th, the Aldenmere mounted, with its tattered lower edge that the glass has preserved for 240 years, and were photographing the reference marks on the mount frame. The 2 translators conferred in low voices near the far wall. The delegation had the particular, self-organizing quality of people who work together enough to know when their principal needs space and when he needs witnesses. The senior household officer, a Major Caro, who I have seen perhaps twice in my years here, arrived in 4 minutes, slightly out of breath from the staircase. Sen presented his case, concisely and without discourtesy: the Secretariat clearance, the documentation schedule, the apparent administrative confusion that was preventing access. Major Caro looked at the clearance document. Then he looked at Ren. Then he looked at the document again. "Corporal Ren's posting at this threshold it's a specific authority," Caro said carefully. "The Secretariat clearance is valid for the outer gallery. The threshold itself falls under..." "Under what?" Sen said. Caro paused. "Under the Keeper's commission." There was a brief silence. "What keeper?" said Sen. Caro looked at Ren. Ren looked forward. I should note that at this point I had stopped all pretense of cataloging. My field notebook was open on the glass mount in front of me, and I had my pencil in my hand, but I had not written a word in 9 minutes. I was watching the way you watch something you know you will not see again. Sen had reached the end of whatever patience he had been exercising. He stepped forward, a deliberate step, a declaration, and he placed his right hand on Corporal Ren's left shoulder. "I need you to move," he said, "now." Ren turned his head. It was the first movement he had made in 23 minutes. He turned his head and looked at Director Sen with an expression that I can only describe as the complete absence of surprise, as though he had been waiting for exactly this, had known it was coming, and had simply been letting the man arrive at it in his own time. Then he reached inside his tunic. He produced a scroll case, small, dark leather, sealed with a wax impression I did not recognize. He held it out to Major Caro without looking away from Sen. Caro took it. He looked at the wax. Whatever he saw there changed the quality of his expression. "I'll need to. We should have the chief herald present for the reading," he said. "Then get her," Sen said. Herald Marin Voss arrived in 6 minutes. She was a small woman with gray hair and a formal sash that told you, if you knew the household sash designations, that she held an office of considerable age. She took the scroll case from Caro, broke the seal, and unrolled the document inside. She read it to herself first, then she looked at Ren, a long, considering look, the kind that carries something older than courtesy. Then she read it aloud. "I will not reproduce the full text here. It is archival property of the household, but the substance was this, that Corporal Idris Ren, by right of the Cross of Aldenmere, the household's highest military decoration for sustained valor in defense of its persons and places, had been invested with the commission of Keeper of the Interred Colors, a designation conferring sole lawful authority over the iron threshold of the crypt gallery and all that lay beyond it. The commission was not administrative. It was not revocable by secretariat clearance, diplomatic standing, or any rank below that of the head of household. The commission noted that the cross had been awarded for actions in a foreign deployment that the scroll did not name, classified, the herald noted, at the household's highest internal tier. It had been granted 7 years prior, in a ceremony attended by 7 people whose names were also sealed. It had never once been invoked. The corridor was very quiet when she finished. One of the photographers had stopped mid-frame. The registrar had put down his pen. I counted 11 people in Sen's delegation. Not one of them spoke. The nearest 2 had taken a small step backward, without seeming to notice they had done it. Sen's hand had come off Ren's shoulder at some point during the reading. I did not mark exactly when. He stood for a moment, with the expression of a man recalculating something he had believed was simple. Then he looked at Ren, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since he had walked into the corridor. Ren was already looking forward again. There was no satisfaction in his face. No vindication, no relief. He simply resumed the position he had held for 23 minutes before the official had placed a hand on his shoulder, eyes forward, rifle at the carry, occupying the center of the threshold with the same absolute stillness he had occupied it with when the delegation arrived. As though nothing of consequence had occurred, as though he were waiting, patiently, and without impatience, for whatever came next. Sen gathered his documentation. He spoke briefly to the liaison officer about revised scheduling for the outer gallery. His delegation repacked 2 of the equipment cases. They left the corridor in a compact, quiet group. Herald Voss re-rolled the commission, returned it to its case, and handed it back to Ren. He tucked it inside his tunic without a word. Voss gave him a small, precise nod, the kind of nod that carries the full weight of whatever that commission had cost to earn, and walked back up the stone staircase. Major Caro paused beside me on his way out. He looked at my field notebook. "Getting much cataloging done?" he said. "Not especially," I said. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, and left. I stood in the corridor for another minute before I picked up my pencil. The bracket lamps made their steady amber light across the stone floor. The banners stood behind their glass, 3 centuries of color preserved in the dark. At the threshold, Corporal Idris Ren stood where he had stood for the entire duration of the exchange, before it, during it, and after it, unchanged. I have catalogued 4,213 objects in this palace. I added 1 more to my field notebook that morning, a commission scroll, dark leather, Cross of Aldenmere wax seal, holder, Corporal I. Ren, condition, perfect. Last invoked, this morning, 14 November. Disposition, return to the inside breast pocket of the tunic. Location, the threshold of the crypt gallery, where it has apparently always been. I note, for the record, that the glass mount on the 3rd banner panel still has its stress fracture. I will get to it next week.